There are moments in television that transcend entertainment. Moments when the cameras capture something so genuine and unexpected that it reminds us why human connection matters more than any scripted show ever could. Sometimes a child's simple question can reveal truths that adults have been hiding, shine light on struggles we pretend don't exist, and create change that ripples out far beyond a television studio. If you believe in the power of honesty, compassion, and the wisdom that sometimes comes from the smallest voices, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will restore your faith in humanity and remind you that we're all in this together. It was a Thursday afternoon taping of Little Big Shots, and the energy in the studio was electric, as it always was when Steve Harvey welcomed children from across the country to showcase their talents. The show had featured singers, dancers, young inventors, and kids with remarkable abilities that defied their age. But 8-year-old Jacob Williams wasn't on the show because of a traditional talent. He was there because his third-grade teacher had submitted a video of something Jacob did every single day that she thought the world needed to see. What that teacher couldn't have known was that Jacob's appearance would lead to a question so unexpected, so raw, and so necessary that it would stop Steve Harvey mid-sentence and change the trajectory of not just one family's life, but thousands. Jacob walked onto the stage wearing khaki pants that were slightly too short, a button-down shirt that had clearly been ironed with great care, and sneakers that had seen better days but were spotlessly clean. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he carried himself with a quiet dignity that seemed unusual for an 8-year-old. Steve Harvey greeted him with his characteristic warmth, bending down to shake Jacob's hand like he would with any adult guest. "Well, hello there, young man," Steve said with a big smile. "What's your name?" "Jacob Williams, sir," the boy replied, his voice clear but soft. "I'm 8 years old and I'm from Detroit, Michigan." Steve stood up and addressed the audience with his usual showmanship. "Now, Jacob here has something very special he does, and his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, thought it was so amazing that she sent us a video. Jacob, why don't you tell everyone what you do?" Jacob shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a small sign of nervousness breaking through his composed exterior. "Every day at school, during lunch, I help kids who don't have lunch money." Steve's eyebrows raised with interest. "That's very kind of you. How do you help them?" Jacob explained in his matter-of-fact way. "Well, at my school, if you don't have lunch money, you get a cheese sandwich and a milk. But that's all. No hot lunch, no fruit, no cookies or anything. So I noticed that some kids were getting the cheese sandwich every single day, and they looked really sad about it." The audience made sympathetic sounds, but Steve wanted to hear more. "So what did you do about it, Jacob?" "I started bringing extra money from home," Jacob said. "Every day, I bring $5 and I give it to the lunch lady to pay for kids who need a hot lunch. That way they can get the same food as everyone else. They don't have to feel different." The audience erupted in applause, clearly moved by this young boy's compassion. Steve smiled warmly. "That is wonderful, Jacob. That's very generous of you. Where do you get $5 every day? Do your parents give it to you?" This was the moment when everything shifted. Jacob's composure wavered for just a second, and something flickered across his face, something that Steve, with his decades of experience reading people, immediately recognized as pain. "Not exactly, sir," Jacob said quietly. The studio went silent, sensing a change in the atmosphere. Steve's expression became more serious, more focused. "What do you mean, not exactly?" Jacob looked down at his shoes, then back up at Steve. "I earn it every morning. I wake up at 4:30 and I deliver newspapers in my neighborhood. I have a paper route with 42 houses. It takes me about an hour and a half. Then I come home, get ready for school, and I go to class. The money I make from the paper route, I use it to buy lunch for other kids." The audience was completely still now, the applause replaced by stunned silence. Steve stood frozen, processing what this 8-year-old had just revealed. "Jacob," Steve said slowly, "you wake up at 4:30 in the morning, every morning." Jacob nodded. "Yes, sir. Except Sundays, because there's no paper route on Sundays. And you do this so you can buy lunch for other kids at school." "Yes, sir," Jacob confirmed. "Because nobody should have to feel bad about being hungry." Steve Harvey, a man who had interviewed thousands of people and prided himself on never being at a loss for words, stood there speechless. The producers in the control booth were frantically signaling, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this unfold. Steve made the decision for them by sitting down right there on the stage floor, bringing himself to Jacob's eye level. "Talk to me, Jacob," Steve said gently. "Why do you have a paper route at 8 years old? Where are your parents in all this?" Jacob's voice remained steady, but Steve could see the effort it took. "My mom works 3 jobs, sir. She works at a restaurant during the day, she cleans offices at night, and she does people's laundry on weekends. She's working all the time so we can pay our rent and our bills. My dad, he left when I was 5. We don't hear from him. So it's just me and Mom." The audience collectively held their breath, hearts breaking for this little boy who was speaking about adult problems with such composure. "Does your mom know you have a paper route?" Steve asked. Jacob hesitated. "She knows I wake up early. She thinks I just like to read before school. I don't tell her about the paper route because she would make me stop. She already feels bad that she can't give me lunch money every day. I don't want her to feel worse. Steve's eyes were glistening now. Wait, Steve said, you don't get lunch money. So what do you eat for lunch, Jacob? Jacob looked down again. I get the cheese sandwich and milk, sir. The same thing as the kids I'm helping. But that's okay, I'm used to it. It's not a big deal. Steve Harvey stood up and turned away from Jacob for a moment, wiping his eyes. The audience was openly crying now. When Steve turned back around, his expression was one of barely contained emotion. Jacob, Steve said, his voice thick, how long have you been doing this? The paper route, since the beginning of 3rd grade, sir. So about 7 months. And in those 7 months, how many kids have you helped? Jacob thought for a moment. I keep track in a notebook. I've bought lunch for 37 different kids. Some kids just needed help one time, like if they forgot their lunch money. But some kids need help every day, like me. So I try to make sure those kids get a hot lunch at least a couple times a week. Steve looked at the audience, then at the cameras, then back at Jacob. Let me make sure I understand this. You are 8 years old. You wake up at 4:30 every morning to deliver newspapers so you can earn money to buy lunch for other kids at your school, even though you yourself are one of the kids who needs help. Jacob nodded. Yes, sir. But Steve wasn't finished, and you don't tell your mother because you don't want her to feel bad. That's right, sir, Jacob confirmed. She already cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep. She cries because she wishes she could give me more stuff. But she gives me everything important. She gives me love and she takes care of me and she works really hard. I don't need more stuff. I just want to help other kids so they don't feel sad. This was the moment when Steve Harvey did something unprecedented in his years of hosting television shows. He stopped the taping completely. Cut, he said loudly. Stop everything. The producers looked confused. The audience murmured uncertainly. Jacob looked worried that he had done something wrong. Steve knelt down in front of Jacob. Son, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that? Jacob nodded, looking nervous now. Are you eating enough food at home? Do you have enough to eat besides the cheese sandwich at lunch? Jacob's carefully maintained composure finally cracked, his eyes filled with tears. Sometimes he whispered, Mom makes sure I eat breakfast and dinner. But sometimes dinner is just rice and beans or toast or whatever we have. Mom doesn't eat a lot because she says she's not hungry, but I think she's just making sure there's enough for me. On weekends, when Mom's doing laundry for people, sometimes the people give her extra food, and that's really good because then we have enough. The tears were falling now, and Jacob wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. I'm sorry, sir. I'm not supposed to tell people this stuff. Mom says it's private. Steve pulled Jacob into a hug as the little boy finally let himself cry. The audience was sobbing. Crew members were wiping their eyes. And Steve Harvey, known for his humor and quick wit, was crying too as he held this 8-year-old boy who had been carrying the weight of the world on his small shoulders. After a long moment, Steve pulled back and looked Jacob in the eyes. Listen to me very carefully, Jacob. You did nothing wrong by telling me this. In fact, you did something incredibly brave. Do you know why? Jacob shook his head, still crying. Because you just helped me understand something very important, Steve said. You helped me see that there are kids just like you all over this country who are going hungry, who are trying to take care of themselves and help others even though they need help too, and nobody knows about it because they're too proud or too scared to ask for help. Steve stood up and addressed the cameras directly. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to stop pretending that child hunger isn't a crisis in this country. We're the richest nation on earth, and we have 8-year-old kids waking up at 4:30 in the morning to deliver newspapers so they can buy lunch for their classmates. We have kids eating cheese sandwiches every day while we throw away enough food to feed them 10 times over. We have mothers working 3 jobs and still not making enough money to put food on the table. This is not okay. This is not acceptable. And we're going to do something about it right now. Steve turned back to Jacob. First thing, Jacob, you're never delivering newspapers at 4:30 in the morning again. You're 8 years old. You should be sleeping at 4:30, dreaming about cartoons and video games and all the things 8-year-olds are supposed to think about. Is that clear? Jacob nodded, looking unsure. But sir, what about the kids who need lunch money? Don't worry about that, Steve said firmly. We're going to take care of every single kid at your school who needs lunch money. Every single one. Jacob's eyes widened. Really, Steve confirmed. And we're going to do it in a way that makes sure no kid ever feels different or singled out or embarrassed about needing help. Steve pulled out his phone right there on stage. I'm calling my foundation right now. We're going to pay off every single lunch debt at your school. Any kid who owes lunch money, it's paid. Any kid who needs free lunch, they get it, and they get the same hot lunch as everyone else. No more cheese sandwiches unless that's what they choose to eat. The audience erupted in applause and cheers. Jacob stood there in shock, unable to process what was happening. But I'm not done, Steve said over the noise. Jacob, where's your mother right now? She's at work, sir, Jacob said. At the restaurant. She couldn't take time off because she can't afford to miss the money. Steve looked at the producers. Get Jacob's mother on the phone. I want her here. I don't care what shift she's working. Tell her employer that we will pay her for any wages she loses. Get her to this studio right now." The producers scrambled to make it happen. While they worked on locating Jacob's mother, Steve sat down with Jacob on the stage steps. "Tell me about school, Jacob. What's your favorite subject?" "I like reading, sir," Jacob said, his tears drying now. "I read a lot because books are free from the library." "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Steve asked. Jacob thought for a moment. "I want to be a teacher, like Mrs. Patterson. She's really nice and she helps kids learn, and I think that's important. That's a wonderful goal," Steve said. "But you know what, Jacob? You're already a teacher. You've been teaching your entire school about kindness and compassion. You've been teaching them that even when you don't have much, you can still help others. That's the most important lesson anyone can learn." 30 minutes later, the studio doors opened and a woman rushed in, still wearing her restaurant uniform, her face filled with panic and confusion. Jacob's mother, Christina Williams, was a thin woman who looked older than her 32 years, worn down by the weight of single parenthood and financial struggle. "Jacob," she called out when she saw her son. "Baby, are you okay? What's happening?" She rushed to the stage and pulled Jacob into her arms, checking him over as if looking for injuries. Jacob hugged his mother tightly. "I'm okay, Mom. I promise I'm okay." Steve approached Christina with respect and gentleness. "Ms. Williams, my name is Steve Harvey. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry we pulled you from work." Christina looked confused and frightened. "Is Jacob in trouble? Did he do something wrong?" "No, Mom," Steve said quickly. "Jacob is not in trouble. In fact, your son is one of the most remarkable children I've ever met. But there are some things we need to talk about, and I wanted you here for the conversation." Christina sat down on the stage with Jacob holding his hand tightly. Steve sat with them. "Ms. Williams, did you know that Jacob has a paper route?" Christina looked at Jacob in shock. "What, a paper route? What is he talking about, Jacob?" Jacob looked down, ashamed. "I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't want you to know. I just wanted to help." "Help with what?" Christina asked, her voice rising with concern. Steve gently explained. "Ms. Williams, Jacob has been waking up at 4:30 every morning for the past 7 months to deliver newspapers. He's been using the money he earns to buy lunch for other kids at his school who can't afford hot lunch." Christina's hand flew to her mouth, tears immediately streaming down her face. "Oh my God, Jacob, baby, why would you do that? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you already work so hard, Mom," Jacob said, his own tears returning. "I didn't want you to feel bad. I know you're doing your best. I know you work all the time to take care of me. I just wanted to help other kids so they wouldn't be sad at lunch." Christina broke down completely, pulling Jacob close and sobbing into his hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry you felt like you had to do that. I'm sorry I can't give you everything you need." Jacob hugged his mother tightly. "You give me everything I need, Mom. You love me. That's everything." Steve let them have their moment before speaking again. "Ms. Williams, there's nothing for you to apologize for. You're doing everything humanly possible to take care of your son. You're working 3 jobs. You're sacrificing your own meals to make sure he eats. You're doing your best in a system that's designed to keep people like you struggling. But you don't have to do it alone anymore." Christina looked up at Steve, confused. "What do you mean?" Steve smiled. "We're going to help you. My foundation is going to pay off all the lunch debt at Jacob's school and make sure every child there has access to hot lunch regardless of their financial situation. That's the first thing. Second," Steve continued, "we're going to make sure your family has enough food at home. We're partnering with local food banks and grocery stores to provide you with regular food deliveries for the next year minimum. You and Jacob should never have to worry about whether there's going to be enough food for dinner." Christina was shaking her head in disbelief, unable to speak. "Third," Steve said, "and this is important, we need to address why you're working 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet. What you're experiencing is not a personal failing, it's a systemic problem. But we're going to help ease your burden right now while we work on the bigger issues." Steve looked directly at Christina. "Ms. Williams, what would it take for you to quit one of your jobs so you can spend more time with your son?" Christina wiped her eyes and did some quick mental math. "I don't know if I can quit any of them, Mr. Harvey. The rent is $1,400 a month. Utilities are about $200. We have medical bills from when Jacob had strep throat last year. We have car insurance. And I'm trying to save up to get Jacob's teeth fixed because he needs braces eventually. Even with 3 jobs, I'm barely covering everything. How much do you make total from all 3 jobs?" Steve asked gently. Christina looked embarrassed. "About $32,000 a year before taxes." "I know that's not much." Steve's jaw tightened with anger, not at Christina, but at a system that allowed a woman to work 3 jobs and still live in poverty. "Ms. Williams," he said firmly, "you're raising a son who is so compassionate and selfless that he gives away the little bit he has to help others. You're working yourself to exhaustion to provide for your child. You have nothing to be embarrassed about. The people who should be embarrassed are the employers who pay wages so low that someone has to work 3 jobs just to afford basic housing and food." The audience applauded in agreement, many of them recognizing their own struggles in Christina's story. Here's what we're going to do, Steve said. My foundation is going to provide you with financial support for the next 2 years. We're going to cover your rent, your utilities, and we're going to set up a fund for Jacob's medical and dental care. That's going to allow you to quit at least one, possibly two of your jobs. You're going to have time to be a mother, to help Jacob with his homework, to tuck him in at night, to just be present in his life. Christina was crying so hard she couldn't speak. She just nodded over and over, holding Jacob close. But that's still not enough, Steve continued. Because in 2 years, what happens? We need to create a sustainable solution. Steve addressed the audience and cameras. This is where we all come in, folks. Jacob's story isn't unique. There are millions of families just like his, where parents are working multiple jobs and still can't afford to feed their kids properly, still can't afford health care, still can't afford basic necessities. We need to demand better. We need to demand a living wage. We need to demand affordable housing. We need to demand that companies stop hoarding profits while their employees qualify for food stamps. We need to demand change. The audience erupted in applause, many people standing. Steve let the moment build before turning back to Christina. But for you specifically, Ms. Williams, we're going to help you build a better future. What kind of work do you want to do? What are you interested in? Christina looked surprised by the question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I've just always worked whatever jobs I could get. If you could do anything, Steve prompted, what would it be? Christina thought for a moment. I actually really love organizing things and helping people. At the office where I clean at night, I sometimes reorganize their files and systems when I'm done cleaning because I can see better ways to do things. One of the managers noticed and said I should think about becoming an office manager or administrator, but I don't have any training or certification for that kind of job. Steve smiled. Well, you're about to. We're going to enroll you in a business administration program at the local community college. We're going to pay for it. And we're going to make sure you have childcare for Jacob while you're in class and studying. In 2 years, you're going to have a degree and the qualifications to get a job that pays a real living wage. Christina couldn't believe what she was hearing. You would do that for us. Why? Because your son taught me something today, Steve said simply. He taught me that kindness isn't about how much you have, it's about how much you're willing to give. And if an 8-year-old can give everything he has to help others, then those of us who have been blessed with resources have no excuse not to do the same. The episode that aired 4 weeks later broke every viewership record for Little Big Shots. The clip of Jacob explaining his paper route and Steve's emotional reaction went viral, accumulating over 300 million views across all platforms. News outlets around the world picked up the story. Jacob and Christina appeared on morning shows, talk shows, and news programs. But more importantly, Jacob's story sparked a national conversation about child hunger, poverty wages, and the struggles of single-parent families. Within a week of the episode airing, Steve Harvey's foundation received over $8 million in donations, all designated to help families like Jacob's. They created a new program called Jacob's Table, which partnered with schools across the country to eliminate lunch debt and ensure that every child had access to nutritious meals regardless of their family's financial situation. In the first year alone, Jacob's Table helped over 500 schools in 43 states. They paid off more than $12 million in lunch debt and provided ongoing funding to make sure no child ever had to choose between eating and dignity. But the program went further than just paying for food. They worked with schools to eliminate the stigma around free lunch programs, ensuring that all students received their meals in the same way so no child could be identified as needing assistance. They also provided nutrition education and worked with local farms to bring fresh, healthy food into schools that had previously only offered processed options. The ripple effects of Jacob's story extended far beyond school lunches. His appearance sparked renewed interest in living wage legislation. Advocacy groups used his mother's story as a rallying cry, pointing out that no parent should have to work 3 jobs and still live in poverty. Several cities and states passed laws raising minimum wages and protecting workers' rights. Companies faced public pressure to pay better wages, with consumers demanding to know if the businesses they supported were paying their employees enough to live on. Some corporations responded by raising wages, improving benefits, and creating better working conditions, though many activists pointed out that much more work needed to be done. Jacob himself became an advocate for child welfare, speaking at schools and community events about hunger, compassion, and the importance of helping others. He always told the same story, the story of how he started his paper route because he couldn't stand to see his classmates feel ashamed about being hungry. He would explain that he wasn't special or extraordinary, he just noticed a problem and tried to do something about it with the resources he had, and then he would challenge his audiences to do the same. Look around you, he would say. Who needs help? What problems do you see? What can you do with what you have right now to make someone's life a little better? Christina Williams graduated from her business administration program with honors 2 years after appearing on Little Big Shots. She got a job as an office manager at a nonprofit organization that helped low-income families, earning $48,000 a year with benefits, health insurance, paid time off, and retirement contributions. It was more money than she had ever made, and more importantly, it was a single job with reasonable hours that allowed her to be present in Jacob's life. She could attend his basketball games, help with homework, have dinner together as a family, and actually rest on weekends. The transformation in their quality of life was profound. On the 3rd anniversary of Jacob's appearance on the show, Steve Harvey invited him and Christina back for a special follow-up episode. Jacob walked onto the stage, now 11 years old, taller and more confident, but still carrying that same gentle kindness that had touched millions of hearts. Steve greeted him with a big hug. "Look at you," Steve said, beaming. "Look how much you've grown. How's 5th grade treating you?" "It's good, Mr. Harvey," Jacob said with a smile. "I'm on the basketball team and I'm in advanced reading. And I still eat lunch at school every day, but now I don't worry about anyone being hungry because everyone gets the same lunch." Christina joined them on stage, looking healthier and happier than she had 3 years ago. She had gained some weight in a good way, no longer gaunt from stress and inadequate nutrition. Her eyes were brighter, less burdened. She wore business casual clothes and carried herself with newfound confidence. Steve hugged her too. "Ms. Williams, you look amazing. How's the job?" "I love it," Christina said. "I'm helping families navigate resources and support systems, connecting them with food assistance, housing support, healthcare, all the things I had to figure out on my own. It feels good to help people not have to struggle alone the way we did." Steve turned to the cameras for his message. 3 years ago, an 8-year-old boy taught us all a lesson about compassion and sacrifice. Today, I want to share what happened because of that lesson. Jacob's Table has now helped over 2,000 schools. We've eliminated lunch debt for more than 500,000 students. We've served over 100 million meals to children who needed them. But more than that, we've changed the conversation. We've made child hunger a visible issue instead of a hidden shame. We've forced people to confront the reality that in the wealthiest nation on earth, we have children going hungry. Steve paused, letting the weight of those statistics sink in. But we can't stop there. Jacob's story was a catalyst, but we need sustained commitment. We need policy changes. We need wage reform. We need affordable housing. We need universal health care. We need to build a society where no child has to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to help their friends eat, where no parent has to work 3 jobs and still can't feed their family. We need to do better. And until we do, Jacob's Table will be here, along with all the other organizations doing this critical work. But our goal should be to make programs like this unnecessary. Our goal should be to create a world where every child has enough to eat, not because of charity, but because we've built systems that actually take care of people. Jacob spoke up, surprising everyone. "Mr. Harvey, can I say something?" "Of course, buddy," Steve said. "What's on your mind?" Jacob looked at the camera, more comfortable speaking to audiences now after 3 years of advocacy work. "I want to thank everyone who donated to Jacob's Table and who helped my family. Because of you, my mom doesn't cry at night anymore. Because of you, I get to be a kid instead of worrying about money all the time. Because of you, thousands of kids at schools all over the country don't have to feel embarrassed about being hungry. You changed my life and you changed so many other lives too." But Jacob wasn't finished. "I also want to say something to kids who are struggling like I was. If you're hungry, if your family doesn't have enough money, if you're scared or worried or feel like you have to take care of everything yourself, please tell someone. Tell a teacher, tell a counselor, tell a friend's parent, tell anyone you trust, because I learned that asking for help isn't weak, it's brave. And there are people who want to help you. You don't have to carry everything alone." The audience erupted in applause, many adults visibly emotional at the wisdom coming from this 11-year-old child. Steve added his own message. "And to the adults watching, I want to echo what Jacob said. If you see a child who's struggling, who seems hungry, who's wearing the same clothes all the time, who seems more stressed than a kid should be, say something, do something. Be the person who notices. Be the person who cares. Be the person who acts. Because somewhere out there is another Jacob, another kid trying to be brave and take care of others while desperately needing care themselves. And they need us to see them. They need us to help them. They need us to build a world where they don't have to be so strong so young." The episode ended with an update on Mrs. Patterson, Jacob's 3rd grade teacher who had originally submitted the video to Little Big Shots. She had become a national advocate for teachers recognizing and reporting signs of food insecurity and poverty in students. She had developed training programs to help educators identify children who were struggling and connect them with resources. Her work had been adopted by school districts across the country, ensuring that more teachers were equipped to notice and help students like Jacob. In the final shot of the episode, Jacob was shown back at his school, but instead of delivering newspapers or buying lunch for classmates, he was sitting in the cafeteria eating a hot lunch alongside his friends, all of them laughing and talking and enjoying their food without any stigma or shame. The camera zoomed in on Jacob's face, and he was smiling, truly smiling. with the carefree joy of a child who no longer carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. If Jacob's courage and compassion inspired you, if his story reminded you that we all have the power to make a difference regardless of our circumstances, if you believe in building a world where no child goes hungry and no family has to choose between rent and food, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this story with everyone you know. Use the hashtag Jacob's Table to share stories of kindness and to spread awareness about child hunger in your community. Donate to organizations fighting food insecurity if you're able. Volunteer at food banks and school lunch programs. Contact your elected officials and demand policies that ensure living wages and food security for all families. Leave a comment telling us about a time you helped someone who was struggling or a time someone helped you. Let's create a community of compassion where we see each other's struggles and respond with action instead of judgment. Jacob taught us that even the smallest among us can make the biggest difference. Imagine what we could accomplish if all of us committed to caring for each other with the same selfless love that an 8-year-old showed his hungry classmates. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for being part of the solution. Together, we can make sure that no child ever has to deliver newspapers at dawn so their friends can eat. Together, we can build the world that Jacob dreamed of, a world where kindness isn't rare, it's ordinary, and where every child has enough. Subscribe, share, and most importantly, act. The world is counting on all of us.